Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining Gwinnett County Public Library for our Speech and Language Developmental Milestones series. My name is Miriam Mayer, and I am an Adult Services Specialist. We are so excited to have you all here and to be joined by our partner, Meredith Rose from Home Tele SLP. Now, I would like to introduce our speaker for today. Meredith Rose, MSCC SLP, is a pediatric speech language pathologist and owner of Home Tele SLP, which was founded in June of 2020. She was inspired to become a speech language pathologist over 20 years ago following her youngest brother's diagnosis with an autism spectrum disorder. She strives to improve her clients' communication skills through the implementation of fun yet functional therapy activities that are culturally responsive in their school or home environment via teletherapy. Please welcome Meredith Rose.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I can see that there are a few people who are still connecting their audio, and I just want to give everyone a few moments just to get settled in. We still have a few people who are joining. Happy belated Mother's Day to all the moms or mom caregivers in the room. And if we have any dads here, happy early Father's Day. It'll be here before we know it. Today's program is about speech and language developmental milestones, specifically for children who are between the ages of 1 and 2 years of age. And throughout the summer months, this virtual series will continue with each month focusing on a different age range. So I'm sure you've seen that next month we'll be targeting children or talking about milestones for children between the ages of 2 to 3, and then in July, 3 to 4, and in August, we'll end our series targeting speech and language developmental milestones for children between the ages of 4 and 5. And one thing that I do at the beginning of each and every presentation is I like to get a feel of who is in the room. So just want for you to take a moment and type in the chat. This is going to be a very interactive session. So I'm depending on your engagement in order to make sure that I am speaking to things that are relevant to you and your child, or if you're a caregiver, maybe your grandmother and you're here, or an aunt or an uncle, someone who's very involved in a child's life who's between the ages of 1 to 2. What I would love for you to do in the chat, and I'm going to make sure that the chat is enabled, I'd love for you to put in the chat your role, so mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, and the age of your child. So just those two things, your role and the age of your child, and that will help me as we're presenting, or as I'm presenting the material, to know which age groups to focus on. So I'm going to give you a moment to do that, and I'm going to look in the chat and see who is in the room. Okay, so Elizabeth is here. She's here with her mother and grandmother of a beautiful 11-month-old Ella. I love that name. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for informing me of who's joining from your home. Wonderful. All right, and we also have Lauren. Hi, Lauren. She's the mother of a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old. Precious. Wonderful. Thank you for joining. All right, we also have Elizabeth, mother of a 16-month-old. Thank you so much for joining. All right, and then we also have Alexis, mother of Aiden. He's 2 months old. That's such a precious age. So glad to have everyone join today. We're going to go ahead and get started. And I do want to thank my moderator, Miriam, for helping to make sure that I'm not missing anything in the chat today. But if you have any particular comments or questions, I'm going to say, are there any questions? And I'm going to open the floor, and I'll try to take like maybe 2 or 3, if you could type them in the chat. And I'll kind of go from there. And depending on how many people are responding, I may have you to unmute. So let's go ahead and jump in with what we're going to be talking about today. I want to just present you with an overview of the different topics that we'll be highlighting. So we'll be talking first about the difference between speech and language. By a raise of hands, I would love to know how many of you all already have a child who may have received speech or language therapy. Maybe they had a speech delay or a language delay, or perhaps they had both a speech and language delay. If you could just kind of give me an idea of that by a show of hands, that will also help me to know who is in the room. But these are the topics, the broad topics that we're going to go over. So we'll talk about feeding a little bit, speech, sound acquisition, pronouns, morphology, mean length of utterance, pragmatics, literacy, concepts, vocabulary, questions, and listening skills. So these are some of the topics that we're going to highlight today as we discuss these speech and language developmental milestones. So what is speech? Speech is in relation to the sounds that we produce. So we think about, for example, the letter B. B says B. Sometimes a child may pronounce a B sound like a P sound instead. This is just something very short and sweet that I'm going to kind of go over. We think about speech, we also think about our voice. Some children, because of environmental factors, maybe they have a lot of allergies, or maybe they have something going on anatomically where they have nodules on their vocal folds, they may have a distorted voice quality. So maybe their voice is very raspy or very hoarse, and that can be for a multitude of reasons. It could be something anatomical, it can be due to allergens and the environment. Another aspect of speech is fluency. So you may be familiar with hearing the term stuttering, or a child who is disfluent. So stuttering is also under that umbrella of speech. So when we think of speech, we think about sound production in terms of the letters that we produce, the sounds that they make, how we articulate those sounds with our lips, our tongue, our teeth, etc., how we move our mouth to form those. Also, like I said, we talk about voice under the umbrella of speech, as well as fluency. And on the other side of that, we have language. And language is how we communicate, how we use, whether it's verbal or nonverbal communication, to interact with others. So on a nonverbal side, language includes facial expressions, body language, gesturing, pointing. All of those are examples of nonverbal language. Even using American Sign Language, you're not voicing, but you're still communicating through another mode, an alternative or augmentative form of communication that we call AAC, which also encompasses other things. Maybe a child is using a device. That's still a form of language. They're communicating expressively through that means of, augmented communication. We also have social skills that fall under the umbrella of language. So when we think of pragmatics, we're really talking about social skills when you hear pragmatics. So we're talking about those social interactions, knowing that you greet people when you enter a room, or knowing how to have communication exchanges and to turn take and to be able to give a peer the opportunity to respond to what you're saying and how to extend that conversation. That is part of language. That is the expressive form under the umbrella of social skills. And so we have so many different parts of language that are somewhat complex. I always say communication is complex. So when we get a little bit older and the hierarchy is changing, instead of just using words, we're using phrases. Our phrases become sentences. Sentences become conversational speech. But when we start out as little children, even if we're only a few months old, we're already using language and communicating, even if it's the nonverbal eye exchange with the mother. So a mother holds their child and the child looks back at them. The child looks at the environment and looks back at mom. Maybe mommy says something, the child giggles back, or maybe mommy makes some sounds and the child tries to imitate the sounds. Maybe you're rounding your lips and your child tries to imitate. So language starts very, very, very early. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what this looks like for children between the ages of 1 to 2. I see a chat message, and I see that someone's sharing that Ella is only babbling so far. So she has said mama, but that's about it so far. We think that's normal for an 11-month-old, right? And we're going to talk about what that looks like. Great, great, great question and comment. All right, so here is our next topic. We're going to start with feeding. So feeding is, believe it or not, associated with speech and language development. So when your child is very young and you're breastfeeding or they're bottle feeding, they're learning how to use their lips and their tongue to move their mouth in order to suckle, in order to swallow, etc. And all of these are prerequisites that help with speech and language development. So let's look a little bit at what those milestones entail for a child between 12 and 18 months. So this is a child who's between a year and a year and a half. So some milestones would be grasping a spoon in the hand, bringing it to the mouth, being able to turn it over, using the tongue while eating, moving things around in the mouth. Perhaps your child is beginning to drink not only from a sippy cup, but perhaps there is like a straw on the top of the sippy cup, and they're using their lips and their tongue to suction. And so they're getting those movements in and building the musculature of their oral motor system. A milestone that is also involved, and you may think of this as more motor skill because they're using their hands. So not only their mouth, but holding a cup with 2 hands. Drinking with 4 or 5 consecutive swallows. So they're drinking. You see them gulping. You can see there's like so many swallows they take, and maybe they come up for air and they release, they exhale. Between 18 and 24 months, the child is transitioning, giving up the bottle. And of course, these are things that are expectations. This is the roadmap. It doesn't mean that every child is going to hit milestones exactly as you see it in the book. You all have experienced, I'm sure, seeing that your child is different from another child. Every child has their own journey. Some milestones are hit early, and some milestones are hit a little bit later. But I wanted to just kind of touch on some of these things, and then I'll also express, if you have concerns about your child not meeting milestones, some steps that you can take to ensure that they're receiving early intervention services if they may need them. So, for example, I'm originally from South Florida, and in South Florida, we have an early intervention program through the state that is free for children birth to age 3 until their 3rd birthday. It's called Early Steps. Here in the state of Georgia, where I now reside, we have the same type of program. They're available through all of our states in the US, and the one in Georgia is called Babies Can't Wait. So if you ever have any concerns as you're hearing about the milestones for children between the ages of 1 and 2, you can jot down a few notes, and the next time you have a visit with your pediatrician, or if you want to schedule a consult with your pediatrician, you can express that maybe you have some concerns and you would love to find out if your child would possibly be able to be referred to Babies Can't Wait for evaluation. So I just wanted to put that out there in case some of you do have concerns. Definitely reach out to your pediatrician. They're very familiar with Babies Can't Wait, and they can provide you with next steps. So looking at 18 to 24, again, gives up the bottle. Culturally, we know that in some cultures, some babies will continue to bottle feed longer. But I do want to make a comment about prolonged bottle feeding and prolonged use of pacifiers. They can have a negative impact on a child's speech development. In terms of how they use their tongue, there can be something that's called oral thrusting that happens with prolonged use, where your child will continue to push their tongue through their top and bottom teeth. And so when they're speaking, they're doing that. And sometimes there's an opening that forms between the top and bottom teeth. It almost looks like there's a hole when they smile. It's an open gap. And that is due to prolonged use sometimes of bottles and pacifiers. So keep that in mind. I know that there are cultural differences where we may keep a child on a bottle for a longer amount of time, or we may give them a pacifier because we think it's self-soothing, but just keep in mind the negative impact of prolonged use of those two items. So scooping food with a spoon and bringing it to mouth with spillage, that is developmental. Drinking from a cup with limited spillage. So maybe they have, still some juice, water, or milk that spills while they're drinking. But you want to see that your child is starting to form a tight lip closure. So when they swallow, they're able to press their lips together. And maybe they're moving their lips quite a bit while they're doing that. Self-feeding frequently is also something that's appropriate for children between the ages of 18 and 24 months. And you want for your child to be introduced to different textures, chewing a broad range of foods. So not just, the pureed baby food that they have when they're really little, and then they start eating biscuits and other things that are softer, but introducing those chunky textures into their soft foods. There's that progression, with ages and stages throughout their development. They're going to be exposed to things that are maybe crispy or a little bit harder. And so you want to also see that your child, when they are chewing, that they have good tongue movement. So these are just some things to keep in mind. And again, every child is different in terms of the order of how things happen, but these would be great conversations, as I said before, to have with your pediatrician if you have any concerns. Okay, another question is related to breastfeeding. Could breastfeeding cause this? And in terms of that question, are you referring to the tongue thrusting? Could breastfeeding cause tongue thrusting? Oh, that's a normal thing though, when your child is breastfeeding, for them to be using their tongue. So no, that is not something that would be related to the concerns that I shared prior to, related to prolonged use of the pacifier and the bottle. So no, your child is going to be doing that natural movement during breastfeeding. You're welcome, and I really appreciate the engagement. So please do not hesitate to put your comments or questions in the chat. And if I miss them, my moderator, she's fantastic. Thank you, Miriam. She will chime in and let me know. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is speech sound acquisition. And what we call pre-linguistic speech development is the first phase of speech sound acquisition. So these are things that are happening before your child is using words. So stage one, and although we're having a discussion about children between the ages of 1 and 2, I do want to start with the foundation, because we want to make sure we understand where children are starting before they get to where they are at the age of 1 to 2. So phonation. This is the very beginning stage. And this happens somewhere between birth and 1 month. So after your child is born, you have your newborn, and they're doing what we call reflexive vocalizations, and they're crying. These are all natural things. They're burping, they're coughing, and they're sneezing. These are things that are normal reflexes with their body. They don't think about it, it happens naturally. And then there are also non-reflexive sounds that they may make that are similar to like nasal sounds. So the second stage is cooing and gooing. I love this stage. And between the ages of 2 to 3 months, you'll start to hear your baby, and you're using what we call mother ease when you talk to your baby. Oh, yes, hi, baby. And you're using pitching, variation, etc. And so you're using those sounds that are acoustically similar to back vowel sounds, or I'll just say vowel sounds, and consonant vowel and vowel consonant combination. So for example, there are a lot of farm animal sounds that are consonant vowel combinations, like moo, ba, etc. So anything with a consonant in the front and then a vowel following it is what we call a CV, or consonant vowel combination. And the other side is a vowel consonant, so just the opposite. So the vowels first and the consonant is second. So for example, it might be a word like up, up, up. And I like to use sign when I'm using some of these early words with children. And so that is just an example of a VC production. And then we have some other consonant sounds that are produced in the back. And like, for example, the letter K, g, g, g. And those are sounds that are easier for your baby to produce, especially since they're laying on their back a lot. The back of the tongue naturally falls back when you're laying back, or on your back, excuse me. So think about like when you're snoring, your tongue is already back there. So it's really easy for it to be in a position where you start to snore. Similarly, because those sounds are back sounds and the tongue is already in that natural position, it's easier for a baby to imitate some of those sounds. So like k and g sounds. Vowel sounds like ah, oh, all of those are back sounds. Those are easy for your baby to produce. So if you're trying to get imitation, those are some good sounds to try to get them to imitate. And moving on to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about stage 3, which is exploration and expansion. And that happens between the ages of 4 to 6 months. So some of the milestones there entail the child is having improved use of, like, I'll just call it the throat. So that's the laryngeal area, and articulatory mechanisms. And articulatory mechanisms are simply what we're talking about when we talk about the oral motor skills of a child. So, you know, using their lips more, their tongue and their teeth, and playing around with sounds, making raspberries, right? And using their lips to make those raspberries, blowing bubbles out of their mouth a little bit. They're squealing and growling. Maybe they're grunting when they're doing a number 2. We know what that looks like. They get kind of tense in the face. Maybe their eyes get big and they get a little still and they tighten up. And so they're growling, or maybe they're yelling. Different from a cry, but they're kind of yelling more. And I talked about the raspberries. There they are. I kind of got a little ahead of myself. But what we also call lingual bilabial trill. So the tongue and the lips are coming together and they're making sounds. And these would be vocalizations that vary. You may hear them every day. You may hear them on a weekly basis. But they're producing sounds that consist of vowels with better oral resonance. So like you're starting to hear them more frequently, and the sounds are a little bit more strong and louder. And another thing is they're doing some marginal babbling with CV and VC syllable sequences. So we talked about CV being consonant vowel. So maybe it's ba 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 ba, ma 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 da 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 da. And they're just hitting those same sounds using their lips and their tongue. And so those are some that are very, very frequent. And a lot of times parents will say, well, I wonder if my child's going to say mama first or dada first. Sometimes, yes, we know that they recognize mama and they say mama, but which one comes first is sometimes what's easier to produce. Are they more easily able to get their tongue tip up to make a t or d sound, letter T's and D's, or letter N's, n? Or is it easier for them to use their lips? Mama, papa, papa, ba, ba, ba. It all depends. So there we go. There's the answer to that question. What's gonna come first, mama or dada? It all depends. Let's see, in the chat, there's a comment or a question. Oh, Aiden does that now. It's so cute. I love it. I love it. So the next stage, stage 4, is what we call canonical babbling, and that happens between 7 to 9 months. And so what happens is your child is continuing to use these consonant vowel, what we call, again, CV combinations, these CV syllables, and they have more adult-like timing. It's almost like they're like having a back and forth conversational exchange with you. Sometimes it may seem like your child says something that is like on spot, right? Like, did they just say hi after you said hi back to them? There could be some reduplicated syllables. There we go, baba, mama. There could be consonant phonetic sounds like that have stops or glides. Like you might start hearing more W sounds or L sounds or nasal sounds like M's and N's. Stop sounds, we call those like P's or B's, D's. And their vowel inventory, we call like the inventory is what their sound system is, what it consists of. So their vowel inventory may have lax vowels. It is an example there. Use fewer velars. So maybe they're not using as many back sounds. Can anyone guess why, based on what we said earlier about the positioning of a baby when they're really, really young? So they're using fewer velar sounds, those K's and G's, because one reason I think has to do with the fact that they're not positioned on their back as much. They are starting to roll around more. They are, I went up a slide too fast. Maybe they're starting to, not necessarily crawl full speed, but maybe they're starting to scoot. So their positioning of their body is a little bit different. And they're having increased use of front sounds that are made in the front of the mouth. So maybe you're hearing some F and V sounds in addition to the P and the B sounds. All right, stage 5 is what we call variegated babbling. And I know a lot of these sounds or a lot of these terms, sound very technical, and they are, but I'm going to break these down as we continue in today's session. And so variegated babbling occurs when your child is between 10 to 12 months old. So they're going to continue to use those CV consonant vowel syllables. They're beginning variegated babbling that consists of using different consonants in addition to the ones that are produced in the front of their mouth. And they may result in multi-syllable combinations. So Buttercup, Takati, this is Bamaka, like just random combinations where you see the B is produced in the front of the mouth on the lips, the M, the front of the mouth on the lips, but the G is a back sound. So they're moving from the front of their mouth to the back and producing sounds. And so that hierarchy is changing. They're able to do things that they weren't able to do before. Similarly here, here's some tongue tip sounds maybe they're producing. So they're producing a tongue tip sound where they're lifting their tongue up in the beginning with the letter T. And here in the middle, a K is being produced in the back. So they're moving from the front of their mouth to the back and then back to the front. That is more complex. And then they're also producing adult-like intonation with like rise and fall of the voice, as I said before, and it's starting to sound more conversational. It sounds like maybe they're making a real, they're asking a question because of the intonation at the end of what they're saying, or maybe it's very exclamatory and there's excitement in their voice. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the most common consonants that they're using. So at this age, you're going to be the letter sounds made by H, D, so D, B, B, M, M, T, T, G, G, S, W, W, N, N, K, K, J, J, which is a harder sound because you can't really see it. You feel it here in the middle, and P. So those are the later developing consonants that they're going to start producing more as they're getting closer to 1 year of age. So this is what we call a speech sound acquisition phoneme development chart, or speech sound chart. And based on your child's age, it's expected that they start to develop these sounds. Again, it's not exact. Some sounds may come a little bit earlier than what you see on the chart. Some may come a little later. But the ones that you see here at the very, very top, between 2 and 3 years of age, is where I want you to focus for the purpose of today's program. So these are the ones that we've talked a lot about so far. These lip sounds or bilabial sounds where the lips come together, P and M, and other sounds like H, N is a tongue tip sound, W has a rounding, and B also a bilabial sound. So these are the early sounds that your child will start to develop between the ages of 2 to 3. Now, we're talking about 1 to 2. So I say all that to say don't be alarmed. Your baby's going to probably produce a lot of these lip sounds before you see anything else on this chart. All right, so the next piece of that, when we're talking about speech sound acquisition, is speech intelligibility expectations. And if you have older children, you know that when they were very, very young, first starting to put syllables together, maybe instead of saying banana, they're saying nana. And instead of saying pizza, it sounds like something completely different. And same with spaghetti. Why? Because those words consist of sounds that are later developing. They consist of multi-syllables. And there's a lot of oral motor planning to move between syllables that consist of consonants that are in the front of the mouth, the middle of the mouth, and the end of the mouth. And because of that, we know that their speech intelligibility is going to be lower. And as they age, that speech intelligibility level should be increasing. So a child between 19 and 24 months of age is expected to have speech intelligibility somewhere between 25 to 50%. So one thing that you may know for a fact is as your child is aging and starting to talk more, think about if you have older children when they were 1 year old versus when they were 2, when they were 3, and you would go around people who did not see them on a very regular basis. You are their interpreter. You can interpret basically anything that they say, because your ear is trained to their sound system. You know the sounds that they have, you know the sounds that they're substituting. So you are able to decode and decipher what they mean when they say something that seems highly unintelligible to an unfamiliar listener, to grandma or grandpa who lives out of state, who only sees them seasonally or at holidays, or friends who don't see them on a regular basis. So just keep that in mind. As your child ages, their speech intelligibility should be increasing. I have a comment here from Paige. I feel like my daughter may have a speech delay. She's up to par on cognitive skills, but many people can't understand her. And Paige, could you type in the chat when you have a moment how old she is? I forget. I know you mentioned it earlier. But depending on the age of the child, oh, she just turned 4. For certain. So one thing that you can do if you have a child that is beyond the age of 3 and they may not qualify for those birth to 3 services that we discussed earlier, for example, through Babies Can't Wait here in the state of Georgia, you could reach out to your pediatrician and ask for a referral for a speech and language eval. Why speech and language? Well, your ear is attuned to the fact that she does have some difficulty with speech, but she could also have some difficulty with aspects of language that you're not necessarily aware of. Even though she may be using words and she's speaking pretty well, it's always a good idea to have both a speech and language evaluation when you're evaluating either speech or language. And just know that, you know, cognition, or that basically has to do with the child's intelligibility level, has nothing to do with a child having a speech delay. So a child could be very, very bright and have a speech delay, very, very bright and have a language delay. So don't ever be. All right, so I think we left off there talking about as the child is getting older, their intelligibility is going to increase. Let's talk a little bit about pronoun usage. So again, we're focusing on children between the ages of 1 to 2. So you can read through, but we're going to really just look at this first line, 12 to 26 months. So you're going to hear your child start to use I a lot. I did it. I. You might also later start to hear them using me. Everything is me, right? Once they turn 2, you're going to hear a lot of me and mine. I love this age. I worked with pre-K populations for almost 15 years in my career, and I call it the independent stage. Not terrible twos, independence. And it's very, very important for children to learn to, you know, gain independence. So it's a beautiful stage. It may be difficult, but it's beautiful. So you're hearing them use a lot of things or referring to a lot of things as it, and using the pronoun I. And later you'll start hearing more of the me and the my and the mine. And speaking to The next piece of the presentation, we're going to talk about morphology and what morphology is. So morphology has to do with the units of a word, the segments of a word. So we think about, for example, if I use, for example, the word grape, I'll just use, or banana, even banana. If I talk about one banana, there's not an S at the end, but if there is an S at the end, it means that there are two. So when we're adding these units at the end, like SES, past tense ED, all of these are things having to do with morphology. The foundational morphological unit that a child will learn to use first is ING, which is why we as speech and language pathologists, when we're working on language, we're targeting a lot of action verbs. We're using picture cards when children are having difficulty with expressive language. A lot of those picture cards have to do with action verbs, present progressive ING forms at the end of the words. And we may ask questions like, oh, look, what is the baby doing? Oh, no, she's crying. And we associate, oh, you cry sometimes when you're sad or when you get a boo-boo. And so whenever we're using picture cards, we're always trying to make sure that we can make an association to the child's real world environment. So again, this is the morpheme that you're going to want to target. ING, or some people say present progressive ING. And that's just basically saying that what's happening is happening in the present. Eating, what are you doing? Oh, you're eating, and you want to model for your child. Oh, what is mommy doing? Oh, mommy's drinking. Oh, look, we're both drinking. Oh, what's daddy doing? Daddy's reading. So using a lot of natural models in the environment is great. If you can actually point those things out in real time, it's wonderful. Or if you're a parent who watches a particular television show with your child in moderation, or a particular YouTube content creator who targets early education in moderation, and you're co-scripting with your child. Maybe you're listening to what the person on the television or on the computer is saying, but you're also making an association. And maybe when you're reading books, you're making associations. Maybe there's a book about a birthday party, or maybe there's a book about the zoo, and you're taking your child to the zoo, or it's a book about the park and you're taking your child to the park. Or with summer coming up, maybe you're predisposing your child to something that they're going to go to and experience, like the beach. So maybe you go to the library and you check out a lot of books about the beach, and you talk about the animals in the ocean and how they're swimming, and the birds in the sky are flying. So these are just some examples. I love using the public library system. So many things. So make sure you get that library card out and put it to good use this summer. All right, our next topic is mean length of utterance. And the short name for that is MLU. And so when we look at stages of development, one of these categories or systems is called Brown stages of language development. And in that first phase, we're looking for children to have a mean length of utterance, or MLU, between 1 to 2 words. So if your child is using only one word, you can model to help expand that utterance. So let's say your child says car. They call everything with 4 wheels a car. Maybe a bicycle's a car. Maybe a truck is a car. Maybe a bus is a car. You say, yes, car, red car. Ooh, car, go fast. Maybe you're expanding to 3 words for them if they only use 2 words. Or maybe you're using some environmental sounds. Vroom, vroom, car, vroom, vroom, beep, beep. Car, go. Car, stop. So maybe while you're driving, you're using phrasing like that. Oh, look, green light, car, go. Red light, car, stop. And using that rising and falling intonation is not only fun, I think kids love it. I love it. Using that sing-songy voice, kids love, and I think it helps. If you think about when we're learning nursery rhymes when we're little, there's that intonation, the wheels on the bus go round and round. And singing songs like that have to do with their interests or the things that they're starting to notice in their environment is really, really good. So if they're starting to notice buses, sing some songs about buses, make up your own songs about buses. But more importantly, back to the mean length of utterance piece, If your child is using one word, you want to try to provide that natural model and provide them with two. If they're using two, provide a natural model and expand it to three. And look at me getting ahead of myself. Limited intonation. Asking yes, no questions. So when you're using intonation to ask yes, no questions, understand that yes, no questions can be confusing at this age. And so if you ask your child, do you want to go to the park? They're going to say yes. But if they're not fully understanding yes, no questions, you could ask them a question that is, let's say the item that you're asking is a non-preferred, and they don't like it and they say yes. That's kind of how you would know if they understand yes, no questions. Or if they're always saying no, but they really like something. So just kind of keep that in mind. At this age, it doesn't mean that they're correctly answering yes, no questions, but this is a good thing for them to use, using intonation, the rise and falling of their voice. Yes, no. And there are a lot of songs online. A good resource, I'll put it in the chat, is Super Simple Songs. And I like Super Simple Songs because it has simple language. They have free downloads. They have free activities that you can download, flashcards sometimes that go with the songs to help target certain vocabulary words and concepts. And if you have a child in preschool, I'm pretty sure that at some point in time, they've learned a song or two from Super Simple Songs. Super Simple Songs does a really good job. And no, I'm not being financially compensated by putting Super Simple Songs out here, but they have a really nice rate with their songs. Some of them are slower, some of them are faster, but one thing that you can always do on YouTube is you can control the speed of the video on your settings. So if you find that the song is a little too fast for your child, you can slow it down there. So Super Simple Songs is in the chat. Let's talk a little bit about pragmatics now. So earlier when we were talking about the difference between speech and language, I talked about how under the umbrella of language is what we call pragmatics, which is really just a fancy name for social skills. And so between birth to 6, and we're going to go a little bit over the foundation, these are the milestones. I won't read them all to you. You can see them on the screen that your child is starting to have or elicit. They're emerging, and they may not all come at the birth to 6-month age, but these are what are emerging in terms of pragmatic skills. They're startling to loud sounds. They're responding to a voice and sound. Maybe they turn and they look, right? And they're looking at you and your eyes, or looking at your face when you're speaking. They are familiar with someone who's more like mommy and daddy versus a complete stranger. They may start to recognize a little bit, not at birth, but maybe closer to 6 months. They may stop crying and soothe when spoken to, etc. So the smiling, the establishing eye contact, the babbling, these are things between birth to 6 to 12 months. They may start responding to no, their name, looking at their image and touching the mirror on their Playmobil or something like that. They may start pointing to learn new vocabulary, pointing to something they see and looking at mama or dada. And they may try to talk to the listener. That it seems like conversational speech. Coos and squeals for attention. So there's communication intent there. And then laughing with playing with objects, etc. Smiling at themselves in the mirror, pat a cake, using peekaboo and finger play games. These are awesome for your child, guys. Row, row, row your boat, the wheels on the bus, all of these things that you remember as a young child. And some of these are cultural. So in different cultures, there may be other ones that are not listed here. So imitation is a great pragmatic skill. So if they're starting to copy simple actions, that's fantastic. That's a really, really good thing. And then let's talk more about where we're at now. So 1 to 2 years of age, they're following simple directions, especially if you're pointing to something. It can even be body parts, like I'm touching my nose. Where's your nose? Where's Aiden's nose? Where's Ella's nose? I'm waving bye-bye. You model for them, and then they look at the person and they're waving too. If they wet their pants or in some way, like showing you or telling you that they're wet, making a facial expression, tugging on their clothes. All of these are examples. Engaging in parallel play. So what that really means is you're sitting next to your child, for example, if they're not sitting with another child, maybe it's just you and your child, if there's not another at home, but they're playing while a sibling, a peer, a family member sitting next to them and playing too. So maybe they're not interacting in the same play routine, but they're doing parallel play. So maybe I'm moving a car back and forth, and maybe the person next to me is building blocks. There's an example of parallel play. Pairing gestures with words. We talked a little bit earlier about how I love using basic signs. So more, good one to use at home, more, all done, up, up, up. Those are just a few. And imitating adult behaviors in play. Some more examples as you see here, protesting to say no, using social words, hi, bye. Okay, let's talk about please and thank you. I love a child with great manners, but please and thank you, those are later developing kind of words. They are appropriate, functionally appropriate for children to use, but those are not words that we expect a child to really have full mastery of. I love please and I love thank you, but focusing more on things that are more social, pragmatically relevant are really good too. Talking to self during play, practicing intonation, increase or rising voice, dropping their voice, rise and fall of intonation and pitch. My favorite one. So in case you have not heard, Home Tele SOP also offers joint book reading parent trainings to help parents in building speech, language, and emergent literacy skills while reading to their child. And typically these are done in the spring and the fall, and at every event, the first 10 parents who participate, who registered and they arrive, they receive a free book. So throughout the year, we've had, oh my gosh, I feel like we've had at least 7 to 8 sessions. And it's something that I really enjoy. And if you're interested, those series will be picking up again in the fall and spring. So fall of 2023, spring of 2024, and those are in person. So you bring your child, or if you're a grandparent, you bring your grandchild with you because it's interactive. And I'm going to show you in real time how to engage with your child and build speech and language and early emergent literacy skills during shared book reading, or what we call joint book reading. So I absolutely love literacy. Language and literacy, in my opinion, they go hand in hand. And so let's talk about the foundation of that. And I'm watching our time, Miriam, but we're coming to a close. So between 3 and 12 months, children typically, they're doing what children do, what babies do. They like to chew on their books, right? And they like to, play with their books, pat their books. That is a pre-literacy skill. Picking up a board book and being able to manipulate it. Or maybe you have wipe down books for your baby when they're really, really young, so that you can clean and keep them, sanitized. Maybe you have the books that have like the little, what do you call them? They're sensory. There's something in there that they can squeeze that beeps. There's something in there that kind of feels like paper that they can kind of like crumble, but it's all embedded in that plastic page of the book. But it may have even like a little bell in it. But these are things that they can engage with and even practice some of their fine motor skills. So these are the perfect books. I also like when their fine motor skills start to improve as they're like getting closer to 1 to 2 years of age. Books that have the sliding picture mechanism, like I know Eric Carle's Brown Bear, What Do You See is one book that is sold that's not only a board book or a paper book, you can get it in the form of a board book where it has the sliding windows, and that is a really good book to have. As your child is getting older, maybe even books that have the little buttons, like the electronic ones, where they can kind of push the button to make the sound. But when they're still a little bit younger, with your help, the books that have flaps are great too. I love interactive books for little kids, but not when they're still ripping pages. I would stick to board books or the ones that are wipeable. So you want to focus on books that have large pages, right? They're easier for them to manipulate when they're board books, and that they have like large and bright pictures. So maybe more pictures of one or two words on each page, and not a lot of pages. Maybe a book may only have 10 pages, and maybe the focus of the book is a certain type of vocabulary. Maybe it's fruits, maybe it's farm animals, maybe it's zoo animals. But these are the types of books that you want to introduce your child to. 1 to 2, they may start to recognize books by their covers. And again, these are really great foundational skills. They enjoy listening to songs and rhymes and doing finger plays. Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. All part of early literacy. They like to turn pages, and their attention is going to be short, but they may be able to attend to the book or toy for a couple of minutes. And they're pointing and they're labeling pictures, maybe looking at you and saying what it is independently. And they're pretending to read. Even if the book is upside down, they're still pretending to read, and that's a great skill. Now we're going to segue to concepts. So when I think of concepts, I think of a lot of things. I think about colors, shapes, and sizes, but I also think about positional concepts, or what we call spatial concepts. And when your child is between the ages of 1 to 2 years, some primary concepts that you're going to be modeling for them that are really easy for them to grasp are things like in and out. And when we teach concepts, we try to teach the opposites together. It's kind of easier for them to learn it. So maybe you have a piggy bank at home, like not the kind with the real pennies they can swallow, but maybe they're like the Fisher Price piggy banks and they have big coins. And you're practicing putting them in and taking them out. Or maybe you have like a cookie jar toy and you're practice putting the cookies in or taking them out. It can be anything. Maybe you have a rubber shoebox from the Dollar Tree or something. And you could decide every month to have a box that has different themed items that have to do with the seasons or that have to do with something that your child is taking to, and you're putting all of the blocks in the box, or taking all of the cars and putting them in the box, or whatever it is. I always say it's great to buy, fun and functional toys for children, but many times we have a plethora of things already in our household that are functional that we can use, that are just as much fun. And when kids are young, they don't really know the difference. So just take a look around and see what you already have. It could be, anything really. While you're folding laundry, you're putting it in the basket. And you're just modeling that word. Put in, mommy do, and you do, daddy do, and you do, grandma do, take out. You take out, putting shoes on, shoe on, sock on. When you're dressing your child, shirt on, put shirt over Ella's head, put pants over Aiden's legs. And so you're just modeling the use of these words. Even if you don't think your child can say these words, that's not the focus. You want to expose them so that they're really starting to make connections. And I love up, up, up. And so whenever I'm using words, I like to pair some type of gesture to make it a connection and to make it fun with the child. And you do it with your baby. You get their hands and do up, up, up too. And use those facial expressions and use that rising and falling intonation and pitch, and just have a lot of fun. All right, so as we're bringing the presentation to a close, the next thing I want to talk about is vocabulary. Look at this chart, guys. Isn't it amazing the exponential growth that our children make from the time that they're babies to the time that they're preteens? So at 12 months, your child may be using somewhere between 2 to 6 words other than things like mama and dada. But by the time that they're even 2, they're using 200 to 300. And you can just see how that continues to grow exponentially. Questions, answering questions and asking questions. Let's talk about both of those. So between 1 to 2 years of age, you want to target milestones such as having your child to look in the appropriate place when asked a simple question like, where's daddy? Where's mommy? And maybe you're in the bed and daddy has like the covers over his head. There he is, peekaboo. just simple things. It doesn't have to be a complex routine, but these are things you can easily build into your everyday. Choosing an object with intentionality when asked about a choice of two, such as, do you want milk or juice? Do you want water or milk? One thing that I always say when you're asking questions and you're expecting the response, and we'll get to that next, children have a natural ability to remember the last thing they heard. So the last thing they're hearing is going to be the last thing that they say. So if you know, for example, that a child really likes milk, you want to try to present the thing that you really know that they want first so they can practice retaining memory of that. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. So when it comes to answering questions or asking questions, what's that? Right? They might start saying that a lot. What's that? And you may model for them, what's that? And ask them, what's that? Is it milk or juice? So a lot of times they'll say juice because it's the last thing they hear. But if it's really juice, you don't want juice to be the last thing that you present. You want it to be the first thing you present. So you want to say, I'll just use what I have. Is it juice or water? And if the thing is juice that you're asking them, maybe it's a picture. I know this may sound confusing, so I apologize if it's not clear. But when you're asking them a question about what something is, let's say that thing really is juice, you want to have the picture or the object that you're presenting that is the answer presented first. And I apologize again if that wasn't very, very clear. The last thing we're going to talk about is listening skills. So between birth and 3 years of age, the milestones that we really want to look at them developing is being able to discriminate from speech sounds and non-speech sounds. So like, that's not a word. So like a speech word and not a speech word. Starting to become startled to loud sounds. So as children are getting older, if they don't startle, we worry if they may not be hearing certain sounds. And so that's when you would speak to your pediatrician. Quiets or excites in response to novel sounds. So maybe there's a sound they haven't heard before, or like a shh. That's kind of novel if a child's never heard that. And so they may kind of like look to see, oh, what's that? That's interesting. Recognizing mommy, daddy's, grandma, grandpa's voice, smiling or getting quiet when spoken to, decreasing or increasing their sucking behavior in response to sound. So like imagine your baby has a pacifier in their mouth. And when you start talking, they might like kind of slow down their sucking response. Or they may increase it, once they're soothed, they may start sucking a little bit more higher response. Between 3 to 6 months, moving their eyes in different directions, responding to different voices, friendly and angry, watching a speaker's face, etc. And then as they're getting older, between 6 and 12 months, they respond to a sound when the source is not like in their immediate environment. So mommy could be like, down the hall and maybe she dropped something and they hear it and they turn. 1 to 2 years, they're following one-step directions with cues. So we talked about like pointing, put your shoes in the box or put your cup on the table, and, asking or understanding simple questions. Where's daddy? Listening to stories, etc. So this concludes our presentation or my presentation for today. I just want to say thank you so very much for taking time out of a Saturday morning to participate in today's program. Again, my name is Meredith Rose. I'm a pediatric speech and language pathologist, and my business is Home Tele SLP. You can scan the QR code on your screen to navigate to our website and learn more about the offerings of Home Tele SLP. And if you have any questions, there is a contact box where we can schedule a free 30-minute consult. Please feel free to follow us on social media. And again, just thank you so very much for your time today. I really appreciated being able to engage with some of you. Miriam, I see a couple of chats. Oh, thank you guys. Thank you so very much. I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
There is one question. I don't know if you can answer it really quick, but Do these milestones apply to multilingual homes?
So in terms of the speech, thank you for saying that. In terms of the speech milestones, they are different based on the language. Why? Because the sound systems are a little different. So for example, for a Spanish-speaking family, they are different. They absolutely are just a little bit different. But for the most part, those bilabial sounds come in first, and then the tongue tip sounds, etc. So for a child between the ages of 1 to 2, we definitely have those same sounds coming in early. Great question. Thank you for that. And
Okay.
in terms of the language pieces, is that also a question that you had? I see you say thank you. Okay. The language pieces would be the same though. Yes. And I want to also encourage those who are multilingual. That native language is everything. I would love to see more and more children continuing to be able to have, full command of their native language. Providing your child with instruction in English and their native language is not going to make it difficult for them. There's evidence-based research that supports that using your child's native language in tandem with English is what you should be doing. So please continue to do that, reading to them in both languages, speaking to them in both languages, having conversations with family who may not live locally. Keep up the great work. I know you parents are doing an awesome job, but I heard that using multiple languages early can delay language acquisition. That is not evidence-based. The research proves otherwise. So it will not delay language acquisition. Our children at that age, their brains are so placid. They're like sponges, which is why it's so much easier for us to learn foreign languages when we're little versus when we're in our teens. So keep up the great work. If you're already doing that, continue. If you've stopped out of concern, go back and keep pairing both of those languages together. And I wish you all continued success with your little ones as they're growing and learning. And I hope to see you at a future event.
Okay, well, if nobody has any other questions, then this is going to be the end of our session. Again, we just want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you so much, Meredith, for your time. This was a wonderful presentation. Great tips for parents for their young kids. Very important at such a young age. And then we also want to invite everyone for our next one. That'll be on June 24th at the same time, 11 a.m. via Zoom. So we hope to see you then as well.